The moment you stop reacting, you become much harder to control. Someone insults you, you explain. Someone misunderstands you, you defend yourself. Someone ignores you, you chase them. And without realizing it, you give them control over your emotions. But imagine becoming so calm that provocation no longer works on you, so disciplined that you don't feel compelled to explain every decision, so focused that you can walk away without needing the last word. That is where your power begins. T's per Pascal Yoff, 8:15 seconds. Today, you'll discover 7 psychological principles that can help you stop feeding unnecessary drama, protect your attention, and respond with greater emotional control. But remember this, ignoring is powerful only when you use it to protect your peace, not to manipulate someone else's emotions. Engagement Spark 040. Think about the last time someone tried to get a reaction from you. Maybe they insulted you. Maybe they questioned your intelligence. Maybe they deliberately misunderstood you. Maybe they ignored you because they wanted you to chase them. What did you do? Did you immediately respond? Did you explain yourself? Did you try to prove your worth? That reaction may have given the situation exactly what it wanted, your attention. And attention is one of the most valuable things you possess. The first principle is simple. Pause before reacting. You don't have to answer immediately. Take a breath. Observe the situation. Ask yourself whether responding will actually improve anything. If someone is genuinely trying to solve a problem, communicate. If someone is simply trying to provoke you, you don't have to participate. The second principle is, stop explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand. There is a difference between someone who needs clarification and someone who has already decided to reject your explanation. You can explain yourself once. You can communicate your position clearly. But after that, endless explanations often create more opportunities for argument. You don't need to defend every decision you make. Your life does not require constant approval from everyone watching it. The third principle is, don't reward provocation with attention. Some people learn which words make you angry. They learn which subjects make you defensive. They learn what makes you chase. And once they discover those buttons, they may keep pressing them. The solution isn't to become aggressive. It's to become less predictable emotionally. If someone expects anger, give them composure. If they expect an argument, give them silence. If they expect you to chase, continue with your life. The fourth principle is, use silence to create distance, not punishment. There is a difference between stepping away from unhealthy behavior and deliberately giving someone the silent treatment to make them suffer. The first protects your boundaries. The second keeps you emotionally connected because you're still waiting for their reaction. Real detachment means you don't need them to notice your silence. You don't need them to chase you. You don't need them to regret losing access to you. You simply decide that your attention belongs somewhere more valuable, mid-video CTA. If you're learning how to become calmer, more disciplined, and less reactive, like this video and subscribe. More lessons on emotional control and strategic thinking are coming. The fifth principle is, protect your attention. Your attention is your life in miniature. Whatever you repeatedly think about occupies part of your life. If you spend hours thinking about someone who insulted you, they are still controlling your attention long after the conversation ended. They may have spoken for 30 seconds, but you can keep replaying those 30 seconds for an entire day. That is expensive. Don't pay that price unnecessarily. Move your attention back towards your goals, your work, your health, your relationships, your future. The sixth principle is, don't confuse silence with weakness. You don't have to prove strength by having the perfect comeback. Anyone can become angry. Anyone can insult someone. Anyone can start an argument. The difficult skill is remaining composed when someone is trying to disturb your composure. Silence can communicate that you have decided the conversation isn't worth continuing, and sometimes leaving is more intelligent than winning. The seventh principle is, ignore the unnecessary, but address what matters. This is where maturity separates itself from manipulation. If someone makes a random insulting comment, you may not need to respond. If someone posts an opinion you dislike, you may not need to debate it. If someone tries to provoke you, you may not need to give them your attention. But if someone crosses a serious boundary, if there is a genuine misunderstanding, if you have a responsibility to communicate, then speak. Ignoring everything is not strength. Choosing wisely is strength. Never react simply because someone expects a reaction. Never explain simply because someone demands an explanation. Never chase simply because someone withdraws. And never use silence as a weapon when honest communication is necessary. Instead, become selective. Pause. Observe, decide, then act according to your values. Because the goal isn't to control other people. The goal is to stop other people from controlling you. When you no longer need everyone to understand you, you become calmer. When you no longer need everyone to approve of you, you become freer. When you no longer need to win every argument, you become more focused. And when you stop giving your attention to people who constantly disturb your peace, you have more energy to build the life you actually want. Remember this, you don't become powerful by making everyone react to you. You become powerful when you no longer feel compelled to react to everyone. Your silence should not be a performance. Your distance should not be revenge. Your confidence should not depend on someone else's reaction. Let people talk. Let people misunderstand. Let people have opinions. You don't have to chase every voice. You don't have to answer every accusation. You don't have to explain every move. Sometimes the most powerful decision is simply to protect your attention and keep moving forward. The first step toward becoming difficult to control is learning to pause before you react. When someone insults you, challenges you, criticizes you, or deliberately tries to provoke you, your first emotional response may feel automatic. You may want to defend yourself, answer immediately, or prove that the other person is wrong. But that instant reaction can place your emotions in someone else's hands. If another person can say a few words and immediately determine your mood, your attention, and your behavior, they have gained influence over you without needing to force you to do anything. A pause creates separation between what happened and what you choose to do next. Even a few seconds can give your mind enough space to examine the situation instead of responding from anger. Ask yourself what the person actually wants. Are they trying to solve a genuine problem, or are they trying to create an emotional reaction? Is your response going to improve the situation, or will it simply create another argument? These questions help you replace impulse with judgment. Emotional control does not mean pretending that insults or disrespect never affect you. You can feel angry and still remain composed. You can recognize that something was offensive without allowing that feeling to dictate your next action. The difference is between experiencing an emotion and surrendering control to it. A disciplined person notices the emotion, understands it, and then decides whether a response is necessary. This pause also prevents unnecessary mistakes. Anger can make you speak too quickly, reveal information you did not intend to share, or make statements that are difficult to take back. A person who provokes you may be waiting for exactly that moment. They may want you to become defensive so they can twist your words or continue the conflict. When you remain calm, you remove much of the opportunity for escalation. You can also use simple physical techniques to create that pause. Take a slow breath before answering. Relax your shoulders, lower your voice instead of raising it. Look at the situation objectively rather than immediately taking it personally. If necessary, say, "Give me a moment to think about that," and step away from the conversation. You are not required to respond instantly simply because someone demands an answer. The more consistently you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Instead of reacting automatically, you begin choosing your responses deliberately, even when someone is actively testing your patience. The second principle is learning to stop explaining yourself to people who have no genuine intention of understanding you. Many people waste enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to make every person understand their choices, opinions, boundaries, and decisions. They believe that if they can just find the perfect words, the other person will finally agree. But communication does not always fail because the explanation is unclear. Sometimes it fails because the listener has already decided not to accept it. In that situation, adding more words rarely creates more understanding. There is an important difference between confusion and deliberate resistance. Someone who is confused may ask questions because they genuinely want clarity. They may disagree with you, but they are willing to listen and consider what you are saying. Someone who refuses to understand behaves differently. They may twist your words, interrupt constantly, change the subject, repeat the same accusation, or reject every explanation you provide. When this happens, continuing to defend yourself can turn the conversation into an endless cycle. You can communicate your position clearly without turning it into a courtroom defense. If someone asks why you made a particular decision, explain it when appropriate. But once you have communicated your reasoning, you are allowed to stop. You can say, "That is my decision," or "I have already explained my position." These statements are not aggressive. They simply communicate that you are not going to spend unlimited energy trying to obtain approval. This is especially important when people criticize personal choices that do not require their permission. Your goals, boundaries, priorities, and lifestyle decisions do not always need to be justified to everyone. The more you explain, the more material you may give someone who is determined to argue. Sometimes a short answer protects your privacy and your peace better than a detailed defense. However, refusing to over-explain does not mean avoiding accountability. If you made a genuine mistake, acknowledge it. If someone deserves clarification because of a meaningful relationship or responsibility, communicate honestly. The goal is not to become dismissive. The goal is to recognize when further explanation has stopped serving a useful purpose. Once you stop needing everyone to understand you, something changes. You become less defensive, more confident, and more comfortable with disagreement. You realize that being misunderstood is sometimes unavoidable. Your responsibility is to communicate with honesty and respect, not to control every person's interpretation. You can explain once, answer sincerely, and then allow your actions and consistency to speak for themselves. Silence can become a powerful form of emotional control when you use it to prevent unnecessary conflict rather than to manipulate another person. Many people feel uncomfortable with silence because they believe every accusation requires an answer and every disagreement requires a defense. The moment someone says something provocative, they rush to respond. But immediate communication is not always wise communication. Sometimes the more you speak, the more opportunities you create for an argument to continue. A calm silence can interrupt that cycle before it becomes larger than the original problem. When someone tries to provoke you, silence gives you time to observe their behavior. Instead of immediately reacting to their words, you can ask yourself what is actually happening. Are they trying to solve a problem, or are they trying to make you emotional? Are they interested in understanding you, or are they simply looking for a reaction? These questions allow you to see the situation more objectively. You stop responding to the surface of the conversation and begin recognizing the pattern underneath it. Silence also prevents you from giving away information unnecessarily. When people become angry, they often reveal their insecurities, frustrations, personal opinions, and sensitive details without thinking carefully. A person who remains composed has more control over what they reveal. You do not need to tell everyone what you are thinking, why you are upset, or what your next move will be. Sometimes privacy is more valuable than explanation. However, silence should never become a childish punishment or a strategy for making someone desperate. Deliberately refusing to communicate so another person feels anxious is still a form of emotional dependence because you are waiting for their reaction. Healthy silence is different. You step back because continuing the conversation is unnecessary, unproductive, or harmful to your peace. There are also situations where speaking is necessary. If someone has genuinely misunderstood you, honest communication may solve the problem. If you have made a mistake, take responsibility. If a boundary has been crossed, communicate it clearly. Silence should be chosen with judgment, not used to avoid every difficult conversation. The real strength comes from knowing when words will improve a situation and when they will only feed it. Sometimes you need to speak firmly. Sometimes you need to listen. Sometimes you need to leave. And sometimes the strongest response is no response at all, because you have decided that your peace is more valuable than another pointless argument. Never rewarding provocation with attention is one of the clearest ways to protect your emotional control. When someone discovers that a particular insult, comment, or behavior can immediately make you angry, they may continue using it because they know it produces a reaction. This does not mean every difficult person is deliberately manipulating you. Some people simply behave impulsively or immaturely, but regardless of their intention, your reaction can still reinforce the cycle. If every provocation receives an emotional response, the conflict gains energy and becomes harder to stop. Imagine someone making a sarcastic comment about you in front of others. Your instinct might be to respond with an even sharper insult. They answer again. You defend yourself. They raise the intensity. Soon the original comment is forgotten, and both people are fighting over who can deliver the strongest response. What began as a few words has become an emotional competition. You may believe you are protecting your dignity, but you are actually allowing another person's behavior to determine your actions. A better approach is to pause and decide whether the situation deserves your attention. Sometimes a brief response is enough. You might calmly say, "I'm not interested in this argument," and move on. Other times, complete non-engagement is appropriate. You do not need to laugh, argue, defend yourself, or explain why you refuse to participate. Your lack of reaction removes fuel from the interaction. This principle also applies online. Social media makes it incredibly easy to become trapped in endless debates. Someone leaves an insulting comment, and suddenly you spend 20 minutes preparing a response. Another person joins, then another. Your attention disappears into a conversation that has no meaningful effect on your life. You can scroll past it, mute the discussion, block harassment, or simply close the application. Your attention does not belong to every person who demands it. However, ignoring provocation should not mean ignoring legitimate criticism. Constructive criticism can help you improve, and serious issues sometimes require direct communication. The goal is to distinguish between information that deserves consideration and behavior that exists mainly to create conflict. The more you practice this discipline, the less predictable your emotional reactions become. People may attempt to push your buttons, but they discover that their behavior does not automatically produce the response they expected. You remain calm, evaluate the situation, and choose your action deliberately. Your strength is no longer measured by how quickly you can fight back, but by how wisely you decide what deserves your energy and what deserves nothing from you. Protecting your emotional energy begins with realizing that your attention is not unlimited. Every argument, insult, criticism, message, and stressful interaction consumes some of your mental capacity. If you constantly allow other people's behavior to occupy your thoughts, you may have very little energy left for your own goals. You can spend an entire day thinking about one rude comment, replaying the conversation, imagining what you should have said, and wondering what the other person thinks about you. The event may have lasted seconds, but your mind keeps paying for it long afterward. Emotional energy is different from simply feeling emotions. Everyone experiences anger, disappointment, jealousy, frustration, and sadness. The problem begins when you allow those emotions to control your decisions or consume your attention for longer than the situation deserves. A disciplined person does not pretend to feel nothing. They recognize the feeling and decide how much importance it deserves. This creates a healthier distance between experiencing an emotion and acting on it. One practical way to protect your energy is to stop treating every opinion as equally important. Someone who barely knows you may criticize your personality, choices, appearance, or ambitions. Their opinion exists, but that does not automatically make it valuable. Ask whether the person understands your situation, whether their feedback is constructive, and whether there is something useful you can learn. If the answer is no, you can acknowledge the opinion without carrying it with you. Another important habit is limiting repetitive conflict. If the same conversation happens again and again without progress, continuing to participate may only drain you. You can communicate your position clearly and then step away. You can also create distance from people who consistently bring unnecessary drama into your life. Distance is not hatred. Sometimes it is simply a recognition that constant exposure is damaging your focus. Protecting your emotional energy also means giving more attention to what builds you. Work on your skills, improve your habits, spend time with people who respect you, focus on responsibilities that matter. When your life becomes filled with meaningful priorities, pointless conflicts become easier to recognize. You cannot control what people say or how they behave, but you can control how much space their behavior receives inside your mind. The goal is not to become cold or indifferent. It is to become selective. So your emotional energy is reserved for situations, people, and goals that genuinely deserve it. Ignoring everything is not strength. Real strength comes from knowing when engagement is necessary and when it is wiser to step away. If you ignore every problem, every criticism, and every difficult conversation, you may protect yourself from temporary discomfort, but you can also create bigger problems later. Intelligent emotional control is not about avoiding communication. It is about becoming selective with your attention and choosing your response according to the importance of the situation rather than your immediate emotions. Some situations simply do not deserve your energy. A random insult from a stranger, an unnecessary argument online, or someone deliberately trying to provoke you may have no meaningful impact on your life. Responding can make the situation larger than it needs to be. In these moments, walking away, remaining silent, or ending the interaction can be the healthiest choice. You are not responsible for proving yourself to everyone who challenges you. Other situations require communication. If someone you care about is genuinely hurt by something you did, ignoring them will not solve the problem. Listen, ask what happened, take responsibility if necessary, explain your intentions without becoming defensive. A meaningful relationship cannot survive on avoidance alone. Sometimes the mature response is not silence but an honest conversation. The same applies to boundaries. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, you may need to communicate clearly what behavior you will not accept. Saying, "I'm willing to talk, but I won't continue while we are insulting each other," is more effective than disappearing without explanation. After communicating the boundary, you can decide what action is appropriate if the behavior continues. Serious situations also require responsible action. If someone threatens you, harasses you, interferes with important responsibilities, or causes legitimate harm, simply ignoring the behavior may not be enough. Seek appropriate support, document what matters, and take reasonable steps to protect yourself. Emotional control should never mean tolerating harmful conduct. The key is learning to separate ego from importance. Sometimes you want to respond because you want to prove that you are right, not because the situation actually requires your response. Ask yourself whether your involvement will create clarity, solve a problem, protect a boundary, or improve an important relationship. If it will not, disengagement may be the better choice. You do not need to respond to everything, but you should respond to what genuinely matters. That balance creates maturity. Knowing when to speak, when to listen, when to set a boundary, and when to quietly walk away without allowing unnecessary conflict to control your attention or direction.